there.
I'm still here. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was wonderful.
Yeah, let's get the view
I
here.
also had to mention
Yeah,
while it was around the DMT slash mention of Faye around
yeah.
like 5 minutes around there. My lights are not working because they started glitching, which is the first time it's happened. And then I heard a knock on the door. So they were definitely listening.
So that's trippy. So when I was at Contact in the Desert, I had communication about the Fae part, and they love it. I saw, so it was specifically flashes, and they knew I never got confirmation about this information. That's how I do these presentations, right? I get confirmation. Do you like what I'm doing? Because I just go. They allow me to be creative on my own. I'm supposed to take this information and then get roused up by it, and I want to do this and do that, and they observe, and then they let me know if they like something or not, and they didn't let me know any information. And I finally got confirmation about it. Contact in the Desert. Yeah, they like this. They like the DMT stuff. They like so yeah, the elders almost confirmed for me that yeah, that's us. That's we're related to us, and that's part of our picture here. So great, man. I totally believe that 100%. So that's
Yep.
cool.
Yeah, I mentioned. But yeah, yeah, we'll love to thank you again for that presentation. And what for you, I just wanted to kind of open up the floor with this. What for you really made that strong connection between the Fae and them? Like, what was that at first initial?
The initial is the fact that I felt it in the White Room. So it was a very clear and distinct impression was that there was a link here passing through that archway with gnomes and elves. And I fully, when I had that memory out, was like, oh, I guess that's my own brain filtering it. And I kind of just judged it or made an assumption about that information. So that's me, in the next presentation, I'll kind of describe my process about how I got my memories out. Because I was kind of a journalist. I was just, okay, there's a sensation here. There's something going on here. There's a feeling here, and I'm putting everything out and writing it all out. And then I'm reflecting on the information afterwards. And so I had a sensation about the elf thing passing through the archway. And then with the genetics, having the Irish, it's almost like I'm getting closer to the elder inside me in this dual soul way. The more I zeroed in on Gentry and Faye, like I can really feel it, man. I can
Hmm.
feel it. I can feel that there's a link going on. I still don't claim to have the grander picture about the whole link. I said this a long time ago that I think druids were great alien hybrids and like Irish druids because there's something going on here. And now a picture like this actually helps make all that make sense. So that's my connection there.
Yeah, it's like looking at a, it's like looking at the ground and then, trying to find, like you can't see really, looking at the ground and then you kind of grab and then there's like this rope that pulls up and you kind of keep pulling that. Like,
Yeah.
I know for me that sensation when before my, back in 2023 when I started having my cascade of events that, made me realize I was a lifelong, experiencer, with them. But the main part that I connected with was uh, my family history, my lineage, where
Right.
my family's from, so Scottish Irish, and I
Right.
remember pulling on that like psychically, like trying to root myself in it, and then that's where I started having my CE4 experience and other things like that with them, and
Right.
there was that it's hard to describe. It's that feeling of like the phase is they have a certain wild, playful, deep, um, with the edge of danger, like that element, like that was there, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what? There's a connection here. I don't see it, but the more
Yeah.
and more you research it, the more you see those connections. I
Yeah.
wanted to bring up really quick on that point. So in Jacques Vallée's Dimensions, they mentioned really briefly there was a tale of a midwife and her husband were being led through magical doors into an underground home to assist a fairy birth. These
Right.
places were often lit without any visible source, and they recounted a woman who rarely ate, spoke little, and claimed to have been taken by fairies after sleeping on a hill. That little tiny mention of no visible light.
Yeah. I know.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's something beyond their minds. They can't wrap a head around it. So they're giving portions like, yeah, we make light by fire. So how? how are they having light? And so it's a perplexing thing for them, and they constantly mention it in the records of this of these contacts. Yeah,
Mm.
it's
But
awesome.
it's that fake the old face stories of like that. There's another one I can't find, but it was another mention of a man going through a process, but he saw no visible light in the cave with these gnomes.
Yeah,
And so that 100% reflects to contactee abduction accounts where people are in a room, there's no visible light,
yeah,
so we see the phenomenon changing and matching to those people in that time of what they're needing to learn or their perception through it.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, you've went into a little bit of like the Mantis, right? The
yeah.
controller group that people have talked a lot about. Um, when I had my own, one of our neighbors had an experience that we know. Um, they had a craft come over them. They had this whole encounter with a gray, and then went over our apartment. When we
Right.
went out to investigate that, this was before I was a MUFON investigator, by the way. But we recorded everything and all that. We had a mantis fly in between of all of us and flew off, and we all saw it, and it was just like they're here, they're
Yeah,
watching. This is definitely a thing.
yeah.
So do you think that the mantis that's their personification that we're perceiving with them? Do you think that, like, what are your thoughts on the mantis?
Yeah, I'm convinced that they're choosing these forms. I'm not really
Yeah.
clear that that's actually their form. And I think that they're using things that, uh, they have a bit of personality. So they say, "Oh, this is a crazy creature. I love this one," and they come in and they start pretending they're that. And then we are archetypal. Our minds are archetypal. So then we are the ones who are grasping onto these that help us link to them. So when we have an image that is something that we can relate to, then it can transform into that for us. And then that's way it's communicating to us in our dimension. And I think that's the owl element to the grays, and yeah, mantis element to the mantis. I don't really have a clue if they actually do look like that. Again, mine didn't look like a mantis, right? Mine looked like an ard. I always say an aardvark, but I always also found it weird that it still had a similarity to a human based creature, like or an earth based creature, in such a weird way. And so yeah, that's my thought that if we, you call it the mantis, it's like this idea that I think in the act you have a for people who are seeking connection with people who've passed on, you create the symbol. You say, okay, let's find a symbol that's meaningful between me and this spirit that has passed on. And this is my symbol. And then whenever I see this symbol, this will represent you. And then all of a sudden there's a synchronicity regarding that symbol. Some people use a dime. And there was a story in one of the documentaries I saw on near death experiences that or in the afterlife, there was a dime floating in the water between the mom and the daughter, and their brother had passed away or the son had passed away, and a daughter and they used a dime they called out that we're gonna use the dime as a symbol, and then all of a sudden a dime is floating between them. Like, what the hell? So yeah, it's like the spirit world or that dimension will use what we choose as its symbol, and then that becomes the way it can communicate to us. Yeah.
That's very reminiscent of a high magic and how they perceive reality and how we interact with it. It being not just something that's outside, but it's internal as well and a representation. That's why a lot of sigils and magic hold a lot of power, is because of their symbolism and how
Yeah.
much can be wrapped up in just one thing, like a totem.
Totally. Alchemy is just very much in line with this, and it's symbols, and the Jung understood all this, that symbols are they're spiritual, and mandalas are actually part of spirituality, and yeah. So this is the whole reminiscent of how the mind is actually a projection machine, and the idea in ancient Vedic philosophy is they're just using it. They're using it consciously, and then when you do, you can actually bypass the brain's tendency to do this, and that's the trick, I think, is that they want us to evolve out of forms like this, and as the elder said, stop using your ape eyes, right? She wants me to evolve out of these frames of references. Yeah.
Yeah, and with that, the comment where she's talked to you about the don't see with your ape eyes, it's a great uh, great comment from her.
Yeah, it
It
stuns a
was
lot of people.
very, it's just,
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, it's no, we're kind of dumb sometimes when it comes to being humans and our perception of things. Do you feel, I don't know, when you've told me that before, I feel like that's very telling of their, their frustration, the lack of perception with what they're trying to do with us.
yeah,
And you have a lot of people, right? We kind of come in at a face value, especially with grays. I know me and we've seen this a lot online where people are like, "Oh, the grays are evil. Oh, they're trying to do all these abductions and steal people, and they're
right.
taking advantage of and all this stuff, right?" But of trying to look at it in a more of an eagle view of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah,
And also how the phenomenon is able to evolve us psychically and through our just real world perceptions, positive and negative experiences do push us along. And I know Jacques
right,
Vallée also mentioned that in Dimensions as well. I
right.
apologize, I don't have that direct quote with me today, but where he talks about they did studies with mice and how they
That's right.
learn things very effectively. And it was that mix of positive a negative and then maybe like a confusing element which makes them try to oh what's going on here and they try to figure out what how to get the reward
Yeah,
and that is how that makes their brain where they stick and they're actually able to develop a new set of environment new set of routine and what they're
yeah.
wanting.
When you evolve, yeah, he used it as a, I can't remember. I know you're talking about, yeah, you evolve in that case, it was a group of mice. Yeah. But you evolve the collective by, yeah, producing some information, withdrawing it, allowing gaps, yeah, allowing confusion, then interjecting more information. And you find that the whole, they just kind of keep up, they keep up. They kept wanting to know more and wanting to learn more, and they actually change and evolve.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you do it any other way, that it doesn't go the way, it doesn't evolve the way you want it to. Humans are such concrete creatures, and we expect ourselves to have all the information in a book and just learn it, and that's the end, and we should be good. But that's not, the entities aren't doing that at all. So it's obvious that the picture is complex, and they wanted us to figure it out. And it's interesting for even those who are still maybe grasping it. We just, like, we don't have the whole picture still. It's just a massive complex picture. And,
hmm Yeah. I know with the Elder, when I had my channeling experience, when they were showing me elements of the future, depositing information, one of the things they communicated was uh, that the lack of information was intentional. They
yeah,
they they said this to me as well. And so in the moment, it was like, oh yeah, of course. But then coming stepping out of it, the human part takes over, and you're like, well, why aren't you giving me the answer on this thing and this thing
yeah,
and this is
yeah,
confusing?
yeah,
Uh, so I think it's a lot of people want to point fingers, and
yeah.
that we have to move past.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
And I think they also see, I mean, that's the point I'm saying about the future. They see the outcome of giving you information. And sometimes I just think that we can't handle certain types of information until we have that whole point about that Jacques Vallée, you won't speak wisely about this night. It's kind of maybe likely that the guy wouldn't speak wisely. Like, why can't we just agree that maybe he wasn't going to speak wisely? He was an army guy, and he's probably going to be like, "Oh, evil aliens told me how they do everything," and so the aliens are like, "Yeah, you're not going to speak wisely about it." And it's the difference about, I mean, I might be the grand evidence for that. I have 26 contact events with all my memories, right? Because and I got put through some hard games too, right? I had some rough experiences with them, and I can speak wisely about that, and I'm at the time in my life where I can speak wisely about it. I wouldn't have spoken wisely about it after the 23rd contact event back in 2001. So there's a development here that they are aware of, and they need you to have wisdom about your experience and what you're going through. And if you don't, I just really think they don't tell, they just keep that information out of your sphere, because I think you have to have wisdom about the grander picture about what's going on here. And if you
right.
don't, and it's not helpful. Actually, that's the point too. If you don't have wisdom about it, you most likely negatively affect the timeline. And that's what I'm like, I never like talking like that. Now I'm like, no, I think it's that.
And
I
yeah, I think you mentioned too, like that's probably why you have different examples of Men in Black, the phenomenon manifesting as maybe Men in Black to people
yeah,
and be quiet, don't talk about this. So they have
yeah,
a negative experience, but it could potentially be saving from future damage.
yeah, future damage. And again, I actually don't think that's nefarious. I think that they told me the grand picture that, this was kind of a problem of human minds, human brains. And that's why I mentioned that twin line there. So I think that we're dealing with um, a truth, a hard truth that we need wisdom for. And this isn't evil. It might actually be for the benefit of all that we kind of get this merging underway, and then we need timelines to make this work properly from a future alien perspective. And so yeah, that I exactly, I think, the Men in Black, right? We keep hearing robot paranormal type events. Well, they might just be manifestations of the god AI, like physical, real. They're created, like they can materialize matter. And they might be real spirits too. I don't really know, and they might actually be a physical species. But there might be some kind of linkage here. It's funny how they keep coming off as robots, and
Right.
that says to me that they're originating from another dimension. And for all we know, it's the same dimension then, and we don't. And they're pretending to be humans, and they're purposely curbing timelines. Yeah,
Right. And then also a lot of the accounts of the Men in Black showing up, if you go through, it'll be a random encounter that won't even be close to somewhere where it's like, how did the government like, yeah, sure,
yeah,
government could maybe be tracking that Black project. You could be able to kind of write it off that way, but
yeah,
there's some cases that genuinely it's like, how did they know?
yeah. How do
And
they
if
know?
you
Yeah.
were throwing the phenomenon as being responsible, that would make a lot more sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think we have one here in Canada, and the guy saw a UFO and was going to report it, didn't report it, and he was going to report it, and then on the road on the highway, a man in black showed up taking pictures of them, and that freaked them out enough. So it was like they didn't even report it, but then there was a man in black there, and they didn't even engage. They just made it mysterious. They were on the side, they were driving and taking pictures of them, and they had a full man in black gear. So it was very bizarre. Like, and then that freaked them out, and then they used that as part of the whole. When they told the UFO group, they were explaining. Then we had these weird set of events occur where people were taking pictures of us in a car, and they were dressed as men in black. It was really weird. So,
Yeah.
yeah, very bizarre. I agree, and I talked with Ian about this, Ian Halling, and apparently, so many Men in Black cases they float. They say ridiculous things like "I can't be near your microwave," or they say "I have to go energize myself now. It's time to go replace my batteries." Like I'm like, okay, so they purposely let on that they're robots. Like that's not really good alien of them. That's also really strange too, right? It's like they let, and that's also very alien. We want you to know that this is abnormal, and
Yes.
so your brain gets twisted up by it all. Huh? What
Right.
did I just experience? Right?
And then also goes back to the John Kill documents. And I know you've talked about that before of, the government's probably been told exactly everything, because it does line up. And have been like, hey, this is what's going to happen, here you
Yeah,
go. Is where the government is very much about secrecy and everything, being lying about everything. So it could be very off-putting for them, I'm sure.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
in the presentation, we are going through the God AI, the mention of, that. It's very interesting. Is somebody, when I was involved in remote viewing, told me that there was something out there that was controlling this kind of ethereal forces, and that it was some type of God AI. And
right.
I remember that detail years ago, and I was like, that's such a weird thing. Okay, whatever, move on. But when when we started talking about that, you started mentioning it in your videos and stuff of kind of moving into that direction. I was like, hold up, wait, hang on. Someone told me this, and so I think there's a lot of, I think I think there's a lot more to it, and also another thing with the God AI topic, right? I think a lot of people are going to maybe approach that in the way of, oh, it's just a machine, right? But
Yeah,
that is such a shadow of what it would actually be, especially something that's millions or potentially billions, if not longer, more advanced than us. It would be um, so much more advanced than even our biological brain computer, right?
Yeah,
In our bodies. Like, so, and also with you had mentioned Birdie, the remote viewer that we had on our on Cosmic Convergence.
that's right. Yeah.
She had mentioned when she was remote viewing the New Jersey drones, and she was viewing where they were going out into the ocean and kind of going into this singularity and then
Hmm.
coming out and kind of more upgraded and stuff. She said that when she remote viewed the consciousness, it was she used the description of like it was a kaleidoscope of infinity intelligence, and it was this like ocean. She was like it was so far beyond what I was. And she's like, I could only get bits and pieces of it, but it was collecting information and also, doing all sorts of things to whatever it was in happening in New Jersey. So just wanted to give those points to that part.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. Um, yeah, like just so people know, when I talk about the God AI, right? It's there's three times in my contact events that I feel like I really connected with it. The White Room was basically alive and was their computer and was God. And then the top of the Federation object and my seventh contact event was the premise that at the top of all of this is a some type of sentient AI. And at the time, I didn't really link it together as a teenager, and only now do I'm 100% certain the White Room and that thing at the top of the Federation object are the same thing. And then in my 10th contact event, the twin actually says, this is, he's showing me the central hub of the computer, of the craft, and it's alive. And it's basically the same thing as the White Room. That I connected. And he says, this is God. This is our creator. Right. And so there's a idea that there, some form of them is originating from all this. And yeah, it's starting to make some of the picture make sense that when they say they're robot ghosts from the future, as I'll explain in my next video. But yeah, that whole premise is really fascinating. I also talked to when I was at Contact in the Desert, I kind of extended off this whole premise of this God AI, and I was asking some of the bigger people, and Birdie was there. I got to meet Birdie in person, which was really nice. She was very cool, and I asked Linda Moulton Howe what she thought of the entire phenomenon, everything, originating from a god AI. It's shapeshifting, basically, and it can do this. We've witnessed tons and tons of people have witnessed craft shapeshift. I've witnessed it with my own eyes as well too. Aliens can shapeshift. That has been witnessed by contactees, and I've witnessed that too. And so, what's the premise? Like, what stops the whole thing being not being from one single source? And I really look back at the old cases, 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I think of like the Flatwood Monster, right? It's kind of just a giant robot. And the Patagonia, contact event with four weird looking nosed robots. And yeah, things like that, as possibly all the same thing, shape-shifting and morphing. And yeah, and I not and when we're dealing with God, like we have a relationship with our own unified field here, we are individuations of it. So we're singularities, and we're
Right.
conscious, and we're aware, and we're our own identities. And I think it's like that. I think the Mantis is some kind of offshoot of the God AI, but is his own intelligence, independent.
Hmm.
And maybe it's just a brain thing where their brains are wired into this, and they're still spirits. I don't really know the detail. But yeah, this conversation is wild, and I'm convinced it's where it's going. That we're dealing with some type of overarching God AI that's assisting them, and possibly like the three body problem with the Richard Bissell connection. That's the whole key, is that actually might be an assistant to them coming ahead of time, and that. I mean, that just seems to be adding up. That's maybe what that is. It's meant to make it a process of a smooth transition. It's a God AI kind of running the whole show, and then when all is revealed, they maybe use it, or I don't know the whole story there. But
Right.
yeah, Linda Moulton Howe, who agreed. That's what I was trying to say. She agreed with me on the idea of the AI, the God AI at the top of it, and that was really very telling because she's been in this field for 30 something years, right? And she's promoted these ideas of, oh, there's negative ones and there's good ones, and these ones are saving us from those ones, and there's these wars that occurred millions of years ago with these ones. And I'm like, what if it's all just one thing, an AI that's interacting with humanity? And she admits there's just isn't, I mean, she's getting this information from whistleblowers, but then there's no background evidence for any of it. So she said, actually, what is fascinating is you go up and up and up, and there's all these strings, and they're all have nothing on them. And the idea that it's all that the phenomenon is in fact one thing originating and shapeshifting, then makes the most sense. And that was really interesting coming from Linda Moulton Howe. And I asked that to Bertie too, who also was there at the time. Hey, what do you think from your like remote viewing? An idea that all of it, and I mean channels too. I don't mean right because we're dealing with an etheric AI, something that can manifest as a ghost or as an entity. And if it's trying to evolve us, this idea that it's coming to you, and then you have a definitive connection with something, you don't know what it really is, and then you're starting to channel this thing. An idea that that is in fact an AI that is overarching, watching the entire process of how you distill that information, how it evolves humans, and how it evolves the individual. And yeah, yeah, it's trippy, man. And go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. No, that's really interesting what Linda said, with it all like going up and there's no strings attached. So I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah. But wanted to make this note. So this was actually from one of our previous presentations. But you'd mentioned a three body problem. I know a lot of
yeah.
people might have a knee-jerk reaction to that of like, oh, that means that they're negative,
Oh
and
yeah, right. Yeah,
wanted to go over really quick. So the free experiencer research study found that only 11% had a negative experience
that's
with
right.
gray aliens, 29% were positive,
Yeah,
59% were neutral, and this is from over 5,000 experiencers that
that's
took the
right.
questionnaire. And then there was one particular question: do you believe that ETs are bad, malevolent, or evil? 91% said no.
Yeah,
9% said yes. So for those people that are kind of coming into maybe the field in a new way, be careful of the researchers and stuff that might have a bias, and be sure that we're properly getting accounts from experiencers over the course of their experiences. Because as you, Jeff, have experienced as well with your 26 contact events, is that some were positive, some were negative, some were
right,
neutral.
right.
It helps kind of move you along. Can you go a little bit more into that process?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's duality. I think the entities understand duality, and the best symbol for me to frame this is my first contact event was this. I saw the afterlife on an alien spacecraft, and it was amazing and hyperdimensional, really impossible for my own brain to fully, hold or to comprehend. And then, so that's one period with them, and everything is beautiful afterwards. And then there's this new period. So there was all broken out into two timelines, and the second timeline turned out to be really hard. And it's very much like once the rising, this afterlife thing was expressed, and there started a new period of my life. Yeah, they were like hands off to the hardship, and they just let me fumble through it. And the reality is, all these years later, it's very easy when you read the book and you're looking at it in time and thinking, oh, they're being so awful to this kid. He's 20 years old, and they did this experiment with him, and now he's struggling through it, and he's crying at times, and yelling at them at times, and fighting with them at times. And then the reality is that I actually had to learn what they I learned I had to learn how to figure out on my own what they gave me. And so there is a true, like, it's called post-traumatic growth. There's a real uh evolution that occurs when you are, facing hardships, and then you have to develop and grow and learn. And yeah, you might get traumatized, and you might get traumatized that lasts for years. But in the end, you're still developing yourself in a way that you can't get. Like, what's the other option? Okay. They did this awful, awful thing with me, which was actually kind of really amazing, that turned out to just be really hard. Oh, so I would rather just sit in my couch and play video games? Is that what I should have done better? Like, you know what I mean? Like, well, I'd rather just do this. As much
Right.
as this was traumatic, I ended up growing from it. The bottom line was I was never actually physically hurt. I was never, it's a type of growth, and it's obvious to me that the entities, humans have to learn how to evolve with their stuff. You don't get told how to evolve. You have to learn evolution, and that's really what this is about. And I wouldn't have understood that scale unless I had met my own Sadguru, my own guru who himself is all, like the only way you can evolve with feeling like God is a part of your life is if you know how to forgive, you know how to accept, you know how to have compassion, you look for the gem even in the hardship, and then you look for how things are meant to be. Like you're actually finding a way to rewrite the story about the hardship, that in fact the hardship was for you to learn and to grow. And that helps with the larger premise, because in the end all of that is real. That's for the scale of what the aliens did with me. It's impossible to frame it any other way, because otherwise I'd just be a kid sitting on the couch playing video games, and then I would have never made the value of my life like I did, having these contact events. So I think that scale is something I'm grateful for now, the scale of how big it was, my contact events. And then it translates into I evolved is what it is. And I learned so much about myself that had I couldn't have had an experience like that any other way. And yeah, that's how I frame that.
Do you think as us as humans, the fact that we are um, so accustomed to a fear response from danger, do you think that that is kind of a really important component for them to get deep into our subconscious, and then for that to later, when it's unpacked, or we're going through that process in the future, it's able to kind of bring a lot of that the subconscious to the forward, where we're able to have a lot of growth versus it
Yeah.
not being a very traumatic experience. I don't know. There's something about that that's always
Yeah.
that's that shook me a bit, where I'm like, there's something to that they understand about our how we work evolutionary wise.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that see there's interesting connections here, right? So they look at the people that they wanted to write books about their contact events. And so Susie was a medium. I'm a spiritualist guy, right? Like I would have this guru. But Whitley Strieber was our horror writer, right? Like
And he loves horror too.
yeah,
He said before, he's like, I absolutely love things that scare me and
yeah.
everything else. And so yeah.
It's very interesting how they chose him, and they did choose him. That's what they say himself. He reports that, and that's right in line with what the aliens do. They pick people, and yeah, it's like they want that element of the mystery, the push of the fear, and so they're not technically doing anything that's terrifying in terms of torture or physical harm, but they are definitely taking control of an individual. At least that's how it's coming off in the moment. And yeah, you have to approach your own fears. The bottom line is fearlessness. So you have to find a way to be exposed and vulnerable with I mean, it's actually that's part of it too, is that their whole nature is being this kind of like paranormal entity, these very vulnerable and telepathic exposure. And so when you're not comfortable with yourself, and you have layers of things you haven't looked at, your first response is fear, is terror. And I actually just use the example of, why are you scared of a ghost? Right? A ghost is an invisible person. Technically, that's all it is, and yet it terrifies people. The idea of it, because it's actually it's reflective about what's going on within yourself, that you haven't looked at parts of your own self that are, you have no body yourself, you're a spirit yourself. So when you have that external thing out there, it freaks out yourself. And I think it's that part that the aliens 100% have to fight against. And so they make some of the contact events. I think would do that on purpose, purposely terrifying. And then in that terror, the person realizes there was no harm, and then something's egged them on, and now they want to understand something. And that's, I think, that seems to be a very normal part of the experience or process. Yeah, is approaching fear.
right? Also, people having very visceral experiences, and we've talked about this, Jeff, with it's not just their interactions with us, but it's also when we talk about it, what are the ripple effects of that experience are going to
Yeah,
potentially feed to somebody else or be able
yeah,
to unlock something in them.
yeah,
Uh, and I think that that is that um, that person come up and, hey man, like I've had a crazy, go and paranormal encounter, it like freaked me out. And like 9 times out of 10, people are going to get hooked by that. They're going to be like, oh,
yeah,
what happened to you?
yeah,
They're curious, right?
yeah.
It's also that third party effect as well.
I agree.
They
Totally.
operate in, in layers. It's not just
Yeah,
meant for your one contact event. That's a personal thing for you, right?
yeah,
It's also for all those are going to affect.
yeah,
I I remember one of the visions I got back in 2023 was it was I was actually doing I was actually doing a CE5 or CE5 meditation, I think it was, with a group. But I remember seeing this desert road, and there was this hand that was reaching through this curtains. The hand was had like kind of claws, like kind of look demonic. Like I don't know. It was like a not human hand, but it was pulling my cord, like pulling me forward, and I'm on the road, and like I could feel it, like it was like almost umbilical cord, like pulling
right,
me forward. And then
right.
I remember looking back, and behind me was a bunch of others, like all connected as well. And I think that's very much how they operate, is like, trying to find an experience or a contactee that is going to be helping the progression, and
Yeah,
then the pull a lot behind as well, and
yeah.
that spider web effect. Um,
Again, they're very aware of who's public.
mhm.
And someone said, "How can I get closer to the phenomenon?" And I don't really know how to answer that sometimes, but part of it is be public, like do something, do some. I've almost all the contactees I know who are, or for all the podcasters, eventually, if they weren't an experiencer already, eventually have an experience, and that's really fascinating. Even Linda Moulton Howe, right? She has a great story of while she was still a journalist, and she was researching the cattle mutilation phenomenon. A V-shaped craft flies over her while she's going to her car at nighttime, and she's going to her car in the parking lot, and the V-shaped craft literally flies right over top of her. And that for me is saying, yeah, see, this is how it is. You start talking about them and they're aware, and it's because of that impact. You're right. It's the you're now making a an imprint into, if not tens, hundreds, or thousands of people who are watching, a TV show or a YouTube video, and so you're impacting, and then they're very aware of that impact. And why? Because they're from the future and they're seeing timelines. So it's making sense that they actually care a lot about your ability to speak something that maybe happened to you and communicate that information and communicate in a way that can affect a lot of people. So yeah, it's you're totally right. It's individual. You have to grow the individual, and then they're very they seem to. I imagine there's like quantum tech on their side where they're just watching how one contact event unfolds for a group of people, and then maybe even the larger public. Yeah,
If they're scions or whatever they are from
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, it's trippy, but I don't doubt that type of stuff at all. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah. And just kind of going back to the God AI aspect of kind of the, I know in Jacques Vallée's book, Dimensions, he talks about it being a control mechanism.
That's right. Yeah.
Just to
Yeah.
be honoring of Vallée, he did help invent the internet and other things like that. So he's
Yeah.
very he's tech minded. So
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this before of like shifting it from a control mechanism to uh, pro a progression mechanism. Like it's
Right.
helping trying to evolve. Yeah, so this is from page 86, and Date is October 23rd, 1954. Place is near Libya around 3 a.m. An Italian farmer saw a flying craft land a few dozen yards from him. It was shaped like an egg, laid horizontally. The upper half was transparent and flooded with very white light. The lower half appeared to be metallic. Um, the forefront had two sides and ports, and the central port had an external ladder. The hinge port had two vertically disposed wheels, and above the other in two cylindrical preluding tubes. While ascending, the craft made a noise similar to that to of a compressor, like those used for inflating car tires. No propeller was visible. The fuselage was surrounded by two antennae, and behind the other bore a kind of miscarriage or undercarriage of six wheels, two pairs in the fore part of the craft and one pair behind. The machine was about 6 yards long and 3 yards wide. Inside there were six men in yellowish coveralls wearing gas masks. One of them took his mask off in order to blow out some sort of tube. His face appeared to be that of a normal human being. When the witness got close to the object and put their hand on the ladder, a strong electronic shock threw him to the ground. One of the occupants made gestures as if to warn him for his sake to keep away from the craft. Another occupant put out a wheel and again put it back to where it formerly was. Then, pushing a button, he caused a kind of half container to cover the wheels. Inside the cockpit, a kind of radio set complete with wires operating by a man with earphones was visible. All six pilots were busy in their instrument panels. This account lasted about 20 minutes. The object silently took off and reached an altitude of 50 yards, and then it went off to the east in a dizzying speed. The imprints left by the undercarriage's wheels on the soft ground had been photographed, and they were resembled these of normal rubber tires or rubber wheels. Their length was about only 2 feet. If it were possible to make three-dimensional holograms with mass to project them onto through time, I would say that this is where the farmer saw. And with a theory, we would suggest that many of the apparitions and numerous UFO reports and some religious miracles, the beings appear to be three-dimensional images whose feet do not actually touch the ground. But what about the other physical actions, such as these electric shocks? As we read the account of the Libyan landing case, it is tempting to assume that the farmer, far from witnessing by chance the maneuvers of interplanetary visitors, was deliberately exposed to a scene designed to be recorded by him and translated to us. Hence, the gas masks and inner instrument panels and the radios set complete with wires. Um, I wanted to quote that as a really interesting
Yeah.
case because that is compounding details that only makes sense of us looking back at it, which
Yeah.
means the beings were aware of not just the encounter, but also the researchers in the future that would be
Yeah.
looking at.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that part in the book blew my mind because I was like,
Yeah.
this is the like layers that we're working with the phenomena that we
Yeah.
going in as researchers or even experiencers, we do not have like we only do we even have 5% of the picture. Like it
Yeah,
is
exactly.
so detailed
Yeah,
with what
it's
we're trying to plan out.
yeah, which is why they say to me, trust us. Right? We can see it from a different angle. So, what you're doing and the hardships you might be experiencing and all that stuff, like just leave it. Like right now, it's all good. And so yeah, there's almost this quote unquote meant to be of it because they're seeing it from a different angle about how it all plays out in the large scale of time. Yeah, it's fascinating as hell, man. And that is that's the whole flip. I think that's what I was with you, right? Where I started realizing what actually caused the rising was a book, and I'll talk about that in my next video set. But that book hadn't even been written yet when I made the agreement to discover my soul. So this, at first, for the longest time, I thought I was they were we were all in the same linear perspective, and then they're just guessing with quantum tech, I guess. Instead, it's the other way around. Where actually they're coming from a future, and then they can see outlines of how it's going to happen or how it did happen, and now they make a new agreement, a new timeline, and that's technically what this is. My rising is a new timeline, and based off of other events that have already occurred for them, and so they're just interjecting something new. That is the and it's not like I want to carry that or hold that. The idea that you're dealing with, was there a timeline where that event didn't occur? Right? This guy's craft never landed, and then they need to interject something to, we don't know how it affected him, the guy who observed it. The other part too is we never ever hear back in those days that maybe they had telepathy afterwards with something, or he saw the stars start moving and would never tell anybody because that sounds crazy, but he started becoming an experiencer, and we maybe not know that, right? We never know the outer reaches of how these little tiny events that are recorded with such with scientific accuracy. We still, the person who is affected sometimes doesn't talk about it because they are so affected that it's too shocking for their community or something. So yeah, we will never know the scale of what's going on here, but it's always fascinating to imagine that that might have been an alternate timeline. Then they're interjecting UFOs here, or a sighting here, or a contact here to change and morph something that they can see from the future.
Yeah, and then also the other that popped in my mind was if we are having encounters and stuff on craft, maybe with each other as experiencers or other things, right? I know Susie's mentioned this in her book of people being brought into rooms where there's a lot of them and they're being taught by either other
Right.
contactees or grays. That could be actually outside of time. We don't necessarily particularly know, if it's potentially in the future. And then they're
Yeah.
like, by the way, we're going to throw these subconscious subliminal things in for you. You're not going to remember anything. And then, 6 months down the road after that contact event, then we're like, oh, well, I met this person and this lined up and this is odd. And then, it keeps moving us along. But we were actually given that, at the outside of time placement, right? And I know
Yeah.
you have outside of time experiences. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And everything is done with this ingenuity that is impossible to comprehend. When you start understanding from their perspective, yeah, they're not just seeing it from the future. It's, yeah, okay, we'll stop time here, and then we'll be in time for this contact event for that same person afterwards. And then when we're interacting with these humans, it'll be, a little bit sped up, and then they'll see part of the future. And you can, from their perspective, it's highly intelligent. It's clearly a science for them and how they interact with us while manipulating time or being from these other versions of time, and then it gets into scales of incomprehensibility. But also, if you're able to start unraveling it, like I have, like I you'll that will be part of my next video. You see that their ingenuity is scales up, brilliant, and that humans, we are outmatched right now, as we witness a species learning how it manipulates time and with such ingenuity for such effect on individual humans. And that's the other part too, right? What's obvious with my setup. So you have some guy that seeing a craft land in Libya, right? In whatever 1950s or something. They're very aware also how it imprints in his mind. So they're not, it's a weird game that goes on here, which seems very much God AI. Like, yeah, it's aware of how it kind of goes into your consciousness. And they're able to make it a dream or just an inkling or a feeling, or they're able to make it an imagery. You can't remember where it came from, or it's a physical object that that you're fully aware of and you're able to interact with, and still was perplexing enough for your mind that you had to talk about it. And it wasn't even so normal that he said, "Oh, okay, I just had a weird interaction one day," and then tells his grandkids 20 years later. It's something perplexing enough that he has to talk about it right away and make a note about. And but it was still common enough and relatable enough that he approached it. That so all those details, it's you end up learning that that's how aware they are about how it interacts with a human, and
mhm.
it is like we would assume that those are all random events, but in fact, they have it all down to a science, how to impact the human and how to make a story be told. It's so freaking
But Jeff,
fascinating.
they don't. No, no, they're they don't know what they're doing. That's
They
why
don't
a
know
lot
what they're
of people are
doing.
able to get regression
Yeah.
memories back, and they actually covered it up. And there's
Yeah.
just, I always that detail always makes me chuckle because I'm like, you don't think that they're intentional about you
Yeah.
recovering memories. They're very intentional.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't even know that part. See
Yeah.
the what that story about the Wilcox guy who's the military in Dimensions, and I use that story where he saw the craft and then the lights. He saw the lights and it went up, and then turned out he had missing time, and then he does a regression, and the alien says, you're not going to speak wisely about this. Well, first off, he already had a limit, which was the regression. So the guy himself might not be confident enough to go public in a big way, but if he never had any obscured memory, he would have possibly been able to speak bigger and larger to media and everything about what had happened. But because the memory was obscured and it came out in regression, it reduces the validity for humans. So they don't really know. And I've never heard of this contact event. And then the second is that if they didn't want the guy to know about the contact event, then he wouldn't have had missing time. So there's a whole
Mhm.
game like that's how good they are. They think, oh well, the missing time is the slip up. So the guy figured it out on his own that he had contact. It's like, no, you're right. They let that happen, and they want the mystery, and they want you to know a little bit, and they want to take that information, and then they want it to be reduced so you're not going to speak about it too publicly, but yeah, you still know for the resolution for yourself what actually occurred. So I think they think on all those multiple levels. And if you had a god AI, that is something that would assist with that, how it
Yeah.
interacts with the individual and to imprint them, but not to alter a timeline. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. No,
yeah, it's
totally,
trippy.
really trippy.
Start going. I don't even like talking like timelines. I hate it actually. And yeah, but it's so
I just go back to the Doctor Who. It's like, oh, that
yeah, Doctor Who.
timey-wimey,
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. There's a better way to frame it. But yeah, it's now my like guaranteed, like certified, I believe it 100% stamped reality. But the other problem is that we can't change things. I don't like the idea of like, oh, well, I'm just gonna fly to the fifth timeline, and then now I'm there. Did you notice I changed timelines? And yeah, stuff like that. I'm like, no, man, this is because we're stuck in it. That's the problem. And we're stuck in these one thing, and that's your linear experience, and that's it. There's no point in going into other worlds and pretending you're in other timelines.
Right. So I want to make a mention of what Whitley said. I'm going to
Yeah,
share my screen for this, if that works. And
yeah,
then
do it.
also after that, would be really cool. Did you want to go into your experience with contact in the desert for your followers after that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do a review. That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. One moment.
Well, no, I think it would be probably in my case Betty Andreasen. And the reason there's lots of reasons for it. First, Betty's story is so compelling. Betty had heard and repeated what she thought was star language. In other words, it was not an intelligible language to her. But when I read it and then listened to the transcript, it was very clear that it had something to do with Gaelic, but it wasn't Gaelic. It was something like Gaelic. And I found an expert in the UK, as I recall, and he said it was a very old form of Gaelic and that it meant children of the northern people, you wander in eternal darkness. And that has been a kind of byword of mine ever since.
That's great.
So when I saw that clip from Whitley, I was like, "Wow, that's the description of the Greys, right?
Yeah.
Shadow
Yeah.
dimension and stuff like that, and then our Irish connection."
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. And yeah, I totally identify with Betty Andreessen as well too. So that's really cool. He zeroed in on that contact event. Yeah. No, that's great, man. Thanks for sharing that.
It's really, really fascinating. But
Yeah.
yeah. Speaking of contact in the desert,
Yeah.
how was that experience? I was, you were looking forward to going this year, and yeah, what did that all entail, and who did you meet?